بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. We want to talk now about superfluous speech, excessive speech, speech that doesn't have to be spoken. Of course, we were talking before that about speaking about things that don't concern us. And just to remind you of one really important detail there that you probably remember quite well, and that is one of the most typical types of speech about what does not concern us is in questions. And this needs to be emphasized because of the fact that we often don't take our questions seriously. And we sort of feel free to ask about anything. But when you're careful about speech, you're also careful about questions. And that's extremely good exercise. Because when you're thinking about the question you're asking, then also you're thinking about what are the consequences of this question. And that's what you want to also be thinking about in speech. What are the consequences of this thing if I say it? Imam al-Ghazali tells us that the great kings used to say that when I speak the word, it owns me and my kingdom. And if I don't speak that word, I own it and I still keep my kingdom. And of course, in the realm of kings and powerful figures like that, they have to be extremely careful about everything they say. A single word could lead to war. A single word could lead to a rivalry that will pit people against them. So although they are powerful people, the wise kings know that they're still human beings. They have to be very careful about what they say. So we have to be that way as well. And questioning, let's emphasize that really strongly. Also, many people have very bad motives in their questions. They question almost as if they were spying on you. How much knowledge do you really have? You studied in that country. Let me see if I can find out how much you really know. Do you really know how to recite the Quran? Do you really know tajweed? And all of those questions are very, very blameworthy. And there is a famous story about Al-Junayd As-Salik, may Allah be pleased with him, when he was a young man, and he is the Imam of all the Sufis, the Imam of the great people of Ihsan, the people who worship God as if they could see Him. Junayd is their Imam. And Al-Junayd tells about when he and two others went to a great wali of Allah in their time, who was also a great scholar. And each of them asked a question. So the first one went and he asked a question. And the man said, I will answer your question, and I believe that you will be tested. And so he answered the question. And the second one asked the question. He said, I will answer your question, and I believe that you will be a person of great learning. And the third one asked the question, and he said, I will answer your question, and I believe that you will be a great saint of God. So the three got together after that, and they said, why these different responses? So Al-Junayd is one of the three, and he asked the first one, why did you ask the question? And he said, to test him. But you don't do that. Again, if we go to a great scholar, we had the honor, Sheikh Faraz, myself, Sheikh Hamza, Sheikh Umar, and others, to go to a great scholar here in Kunya yesterday. And if we ask questions to get knowledge, certainly not to test him, to see is he really what he's said to be. That would be very wrong, very impolite. Okay, so that's what this person did. He asked the question to test the scholar. Is he really that knowledgeable? So he said, I'll answer your question, but you will be tested. And then the second one, he said, I asked the question for knowledge. And that's a valid reason. So he said, you will then be given great knowledge. And the third one was Al-Junayd himself. And he said, I just wanted to get close to him. I just wanted to have his blessing. So he said, you'll be a person of great blessing. So again, the way we ask questions is very important. And we don't want to talk about that too much. But in some Muslim countries, culture is very important. Good culture is extremely important. And in Western countries, the United States, Canada, Britain, and elsewhere, Spain and Portugal, we have to really be about creating a beautiful, dynamic Muslim culture. Okay, but also we have to always be careful about the aspects of culture that are not good, the aspects of cultures that decay. And this often happens with Muslims, that we develop cultures that are not healthy. And in many countries in the Muslim world, people have the habit of asking questions just to find out about you. They don't ask the question with any sincere motive to learn or to be enlightened. It's just, I want to know the truth about you. What are your motives? Who do you belong to? Who do you work for? What are you interested in? Do you really have the knowledge people say you have or not? And that is extremely blameworthy. Okay, so inshallah we'll go on now to talk about superfluous speech. Al-fudul min al-kalam. Excessive speech. So we need temperance. We need to be able to temper ourselves, measure ourselves in all things. The way we drink, the way we eat, but also in speech. It's very, very important. And the Prophet ﷺ was given this prophetic gift of jawami' al-kalim, of little words that bring all the meanings together. And we could talk about that at great length, the power of his language. But the Prophet ﷺ always spoke very little, very beautifully. Sometimes he will speak at length, it's true. Usually it's very few words. And you could think of examples. I mean, one of the examples that's so beautiful is of the Bedouins. The Bedouins are really, God bless them. I mean, they did so much good for us because they would ask questions when nobody else would. And this Bedouin walks into the mosque. It's Friday. The Prophet ﷺ is on the minbar. He's giving the khutbah. You're not supposed to talk. You're supposed to sit down. And the Bedouin walks in. He says, when is the day of judgment? Mata sa'a. When's the hour of the day of judgment? So what did the beautiful Prophet say? Again, look how brilliant his response is. It is prophecy. But the Prophet looks at him. The Prophet smiles at him. The Prophet loves these people. He understands them. And he says, وَمَا أَعْدَدْتَ لَهَا? What did you prepare for it? What a beautiful answer, a beautiful question. And what preparations have you made for the day of judgment? And then the Bedouin gives an answer that made everyone happy forever. He said, مَا أَعْدَدْتُ لَهَا كَثِيرَ صَلَاةٍ وَلَا كَثِيرَ صَوْمٍ أو صِيَامٍ. I didn't prepare for it a lot of prayer or a lot of fasting. He will do his 5 daily prayers, but he doesn't pray all night. He said, I'm lazy. And I don't fast every other day. لَكِنِّي أُحِبُّ اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ. But I love God and I love His Messenger. And then the Prophet said, you will be with the one you love. And the Sahaba said they never, after the day when each of them took the Shahada and joined Islam, which was their greatest day of all, they never had so much joy as they had when they heard that answer. But look how short the exchange is. And these are people, and that was the nature of Arab culture. They're very careful about speech. They're very conscious about speech. And they don't like superfluous speech. So the Prophet spoke, مَا قَلَّ وَدَلَّ. What is little, few words, قَلَّ وَدَلَّ, but indicates many meanings. And you want to strive to be like that too. Superfluous speech is whenever we say something which is more than enough. And this often reflects bad judgment. Okay? We do it, all of us do it. Most of us do it. We talk and we talk and we talk, but really you've said enough. And if you want the meaning that you are talking about to be understood, then you don't want to just keep talking. Let them think about what you said. Let them process what you said. Excessive speech often reflects lack of self-control. And I think you know how true that is. It's so difficult to hold ourselves back, especially in those situations when speaking gives us sort of the limelight. People are listening to us. We're saying good things. And then just to say, okay, that's enough. Be quiet. Let other people speak. That takes remarkable self-control. Often it's a sign of carelessness and heedlessness. Again, we don't want to be robots. We are not mechanical. We have to look at the situation. There are times when it's good to speak a lot and laugh and have a good time and not to be so careful, especially when we're really enjoying ourselves among our friends. You know, so we're not robots, we're not mechanical. But still there is a time and place for everything. And the more that we are able to focus on the meaning we want to communicate, and then the words that communicate them, and these words are enough, then the better that is. Again, our brother asked about Malcolm X in the dictionary. You know, a lot of people today don't listen to words. And this is another problem as well. One of the great things about rote learning, memorized learning, is that you memorize a beautiful text. You know what every word means. You also know the indications that are in it, the implications that are in it. You focus on the word. Okay, and then you learn to think by the words. Of course, memorization is such an important part of learning, Islamic learning and other types of learning. And today we don't give memorization the prominence that it deserves. But one of the most important things about memory as an educational tool is that you know what the words mean that you memorized. And they unlock for you meanings. And again, as Rumi said, Maulana Jalaluddin, that the words of wisdom, the words of God, the words of the prophets, their light is veiled. And they release their light. So all words are like that when they're used properly. Some of them may not have a lot of light, but they always have meanings. They always have implications. So you want to focus on that. And again, this is why when you listen to, especially if you listen to someone like Sheikh Hamza, you listen to traditional scholars, they use their words very carefully. Pay attention to their words. Try to memorize their words as they speak. And then when you repeat what they said, try to get their words back. Many times we can't do that. And many times we just get the meaning. But often when we put that meaning in our own words, which are not so careful, we change the meaning. So this is why it's so important to speak carefully and to listen carefully also. Economy of words. What a beautiful thing. Most superfluous speech is not forbidden and it's not blameworthy. It's mubah. But again, it also belongs to the lentil, the garlics, the green herbs, the onions, and so forth, that are ordinary speech. And there's no great reward in that. It is not heavenly. It doesn't belong to the next world. So therefore, in the mubah, that's where you want to be really careful. especially because the mubah, the words that are permissible, they're not blameworthy, but they often overlap. They often lead to other things. So when you begin to watch yourself carefully in this neutral area, then you'll be much more effective when you go into other areas where your speech is really critical. Imam al-Ghazali says, may Allah be pleased with him, whenever one word is enough, two are superfluous. So we need to learn to speak briefly and to the point. Again, why can't I do that? Because of the fact that I'm not sure about what I'm saying. That's why it is. I know that there's a meaning I want to communicate, but I can't really evaluate my words to know, did they communicate that or not? And again, repetition can be very beneficial, especially when it comes to teaching. But you need to know, I communicated the meaning. And therefore, it's not necessary to say anything more. I might say it just to make it more clear, just to help, but I don't have to do that. And most of us, we have a hard time with that. This is also one of the reasons why one of the best ways to learn how to speak is to write. And when you write, to edit your writing, to delete. And most people will agree with you that whenever you write something, especially something that pertains to knowledge, like a paper that you wrote for college, deletion will only make it better. You want to learn to delete from what you said as much as possible. Anything superfluous. Then your language becomes tight, becomes tough. It communicates. It's readable. And there are other things that we should consider there also, but we won't go into that right now. But we need to learn to delete. And of course, when you write, that should be one of the main things you're doing. You wrote this beautiful passage. Now see if you can't delete 20%. People hand in books to editors, and they might say, delete 50%. What? 50%? You said, say, Alhamdulillah. If I can delete 50%, this book will be lean. This book will be good. So, and you want to learn to speak the same way. Writing is very important. And, many of you are really good writers, and you write, but that's something you want to continue to do, write, and write carefully. One of the greatest writers in history, he's an Englishman. He wrote the history of England. He lived in the 1700s, I believe. I can't remember his name right now. His History of England is a classic work of history and a classic work of prose. He wrote that and rewrote it over 14 times by hand, the whole thing. Each time trying to get it less than it was, or finding a better word, deleting the words that were not necessary. So his prose is just golden. And you can read the book just to see how he speaks. Arnold Toynbee is another example of that. Master of the English language. Careful writer, careful speaker. So we have to learn to speak briefly and to the point. Few words, clear words, meaningful words, carefully selected words, the dictionary. That should be your best friend. And also the dictionaries of synonyms, the thesaurus, antonyms. Find the right word. Get our tongues behind our minds, our hearts. The more economical we are in the way we speak, the easier that becomes. Ibn Abi al-Rabah, may Allah be pleased with him, who's one of the great Salaf as-Salih, he said, those who were before you, meaning the Prophet, and the companions and the successors, greatly disliked superfluous speech. Okay, that's important. Superfluous speech itself is generally mubah. It is not makruh. But the act of continually doing that, the Prophet ﷺ, his companions, and the Salaf as-Salih, they did not like that. They greatly disliked that. What an excellent man he is, Imam Malik said about a person, except that he says in a single day the words of an entire month. They were really careful about that. Many traditional people are that way. The First Nations of America tended to be like that. And their languages were extremely rich. Their languages were extremely sophisticated. They had many things to say, but they loved silence. They want to listen to you. They want to check you out. They want to think carefully. And when they spoke, you could write down in gold what they said. I remember one Lakota chieftain who went to Washington, D.C. This was after the unfortunate treaty was made. They wanted to show him how great their civilization was in Washington, D.C. They took him to a museum of art, and he said, "You white people are very strange. You destroy nature, and then you take some oil paints and put them on a canvas and think that you have done it an honor." Again, look at that. That, to me, that is a tremendous insight. And no doubt he said it more eloquently than that. But, because you can paint a picture of the mountain, you think you've saved it? You destroy our land. You destroy nature. And then you come and take some photographs and paint some pictures, and you think that you've done service to nature. The Prophet said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, طوبى لمن أمسك الفضل من لسانه وأنفق الفضل من ماله. طوبى, good tidings. Jesus used that word. Syriac and Aramaic translations of the words of Jesus, we don't really have Jesus' original words, but he will say, طوبى, blessed be the poor. طوبى لمشخينه. طوبى لمشخينه. Good tidings to the poor. Okay, so good tidings, tuba, to anyone who holds back the excess of his tongue. Good tidings to anyone who holds back superfluous speech, but spends the excess of his wealth. Imam al-Ghazali says, look how strange things are. We turned it upside down. So you have money you don't need. Do we ever spend that? No. It's hard to do that, isn't it? We want to hold on to that excess money, but in reality, it's good to be charitable. It's good to give. You'll get more. So your excess money, tuba, good tidings to you, if you have the manliness or the womanliness to be able to spend that freely, to use it properly. Give it to the good people who deserve it, good projects. And with regard to your excessive speech, that you don't spend, that you hold back. They say in a story of Sulaiman, the great prophet Solomon, alayhi salam, he had control over the jinn. So he sent an ifrit to the marketplace. And he sent somebody to watch him. And so the ifrit went to the marketplace. Often they say the ifrit is the learned jinn. He's the scholarly jinn. The ifrit can do all kinds of things. Solomon asked, the ifrit tells Solomon, I can bring her throne here before you get up from this session. So he knows a lot of things. He knows all sorts of secrets. So this ifrit, he sent him to the marketplace, and then they noticed that he's always looking up and looking down, looking up and looking down. And so Solomon learned about that. And then he's shaking his head in amazement, like, oh my God, looks up, looks down, oh my God. And so Solomon said, we saw you do this, so please explain. He said, عجبت من الملائكة على رؤوس الناس ما أسرع ما يكتبون ومن الذين أسفل منهم ما أسرع ما يملون. So he said, I was amazed by the angels on the heads of the people, how fast they can write. They write down everything you say, even the sigh that you make. Oh, they write that down. Everything. So he said, they write so fast. And I was amazed by the people below them, how fast they dictate. Because they just talk and talk and talk, and the angels write down everything. And a lot of that they will wish was never written down. So let's suffice with that for right now. And now we want to go on to a new topic. And now we're talking about words that are not dignified. And these are words that are not generally praiseworthy. They may be. So again, Imam al-Ghazali is going to walk us carefully into these different types of speech, beginning with the ones that are the most innocent, like superfluous speech, speaking about what does not concern us, and then going into ones that are more and more problematic or questionable. So here he talks about mira, contentiousness. Mira, contentiousness. You say something to me, really? That's contentiousness. Are you sure? That's contentiousness. Okay? I don't believe that. That's contentiousness. Mira, being argumentative, jadal. And then disputation, which is khusuma, which really means arguing for your right. Okay, so that's not wrong to do, but even when we want to argue for our own rights, like, why did you do this to me? You know, why did you put me in that place? Why didn't you do this for me? That's khusuma. And it's not necessarily wrong. In fact, it might even be obligatory. But nevertheless, it's a place where you have to be very careful about your speech. Sarcasm. Many people have that gift. They're very sarcastic. They're very insightful. And this is, again, not wrong across the board. And especially when Muslims are in difficult situations as they are today, we need people who can defend us, who are sarcastic, who are humorous, who can even be contentious and argumentative and disputatious, because people have got to stand up for us. We have to stand up for ourselves. We have to clarify who we are, what our situation is, what's going on in the world. You know, so these things also have a right, they have a good place and they have a bad place. The Prophet said, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, إِنَّ الرَّجُلَ لَيَتَكَلَّمُ بِالْكَلِمَةِ مِنْ رِضْوَانِ اللَّهِ مَا يَظُنُّ أَن تَبْلُغَ بِهِ مَا بَلَغَتْ فَيَكْتُبُ اللَّهُ بِهَا رِضْوَانَهُ إِلَى يَوْمِ الْقِيَامَةِ. The Prophet said, truly a person may speak a word of God's good pleasure, a word that brings God's good pleasure, never thinking that that word would bring him what it brought him, would take him to what it took him to. And yet God will record, because of it, his good pleasure for that person until the day of resurrection. So you say a good word, and you don't think anything of it, but God loves you so much for that beautiful word you said, maybe to defend your brother, defend your sister, to help them out of a difficult situation, maybe to bring them back from the brink of disaster. As many people are tested severely always, but especially in this time. What do you believe in now? Belief is an act of trust. In order for us to be believers, we must be trustworthy. We must be full. But what happens when our trusts are betrayed and betrayed and betrayed? And unfortunately, that's the world we live in today. And it's one of the signs of the last day. Who can you believe? Who can you trust? So we need to have people like that. Maybe you're one of the people who rescues a person who doesn't believe anymore. I don't trust anybody. Maybe they trust you. So maybe you say to them a beautiful word that you don't even think about, and God loves you forever because you said that. So again, the good word, you never know how good it is. Never underestimate it. وَإِنَّ الرَّجُلَ لَيَتَكَلَّمُ بِالْكَلِمَةِ مِنْ سَخَطِ اللَّهِ مَا يَظُنُّ أَنْ تَبْلُغَ بِهِ مَا بَلَغَتْ فَيَكْتُبُ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ بِهَا سَخَطَهُ إِلَى يَوْمِ الْقِيَامَةِ. And a person may speak a word of God's wrath, a word deserving God's anger, never thinking it would take him to what it took him to. No big deal. I didn't mean anything. I was speaking the truth. And then God will record because of it his wrath until the day of resurrection. So be careful about what you say. Prophet said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, a man says a word that pertains to the wrath of God, never thinking a thing about it, and because of it he falls 70 autumns, 70 years into the fire. The bridge that goes above the fire is true. The fire is like another planet. The garden is another world. It's not this world. It's another world. This world ends. This world is finished. And the bridge that goes from this world, the mawqif, where we are judged, to the next world, it's very long, as you know. The distance between it and the fire, Jahannam, which is the top layer of the fire, is 70 years. You fall a lifetime before you get there. Because it's a long way away, but it has powerful gravity, and it's pulling the people there. So the man falls into the fire because of that single word. So again, if you and I are people of the hereafter, may we be people of the hereafter, we don't want that. We don't want to say any word that God will take us to task for. Okay, you want to clear your record of that completely. Be careful of what you say. This is taqwa. This is being God conscious. The Prophet said, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, أَعْظَمُ النَّاسِ خَطَايَا يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ أكثرهم خوضا في الباطل. أكثر الناس خطايا يوم القيامة أكثرهم خوضا بالباطل. The people with the greatest wrongs, the greatest sins, the greatest bad deeds on the day of resurrection will be those most given to speaking about falsehood. They just talk and talk. Khawd. They just talk on and on and on. They talk on and on and on about batil, things that are false, things that are falsehood, or even things that have no value in them. So they end up in a very, very bad situation. The types of falsehood, Imam al-Ghazali says, that people involve themselves in and engross themselves in are complex and countless. Some of them are very clear. I've been in countries, for example, a particular place, where we had a musalla in the street. It's a nice musalla, but it's right on the street. And there are certain youths who would be about maybe, just maybe a stone's throw away. And they argue and they debate and they raise their voices and they curse each other and so forth. Khawdun fil batil. And they can go on for hours and hours and hours. It's very offensive to your ears. Okay, and we want to be polite. Maybe some people say, could you please be quiet? But many people do that. Many people do that. They talk. And it's like, they have no consciousness whatsoever of what these words actually are and the price they will have to pay for them. So he says, the only way that you can keep yourself safe and steer clear of these kind of complex and difficult situations of engaging ourselves in worthless speech is to speak carefully about only the things that concern you, especially in religious matters and worldly matters. So let's talk about mira. It's a hard word to translate. And I would translate it as being contentiousness. And mira is when we object to what another person has said in order to show their defects or the defects of what they say, either in the words they chose, the meanings that they expressed, or their intent. So mira is when you're always ready to challenge, and it has many, many different aspects, such as, for example, correcting people's grammar, their pronunciation, their structure of speech. Now that is an important thing. My mother, may God bless her, she was an English teacher, and she knew how to write, and she knew how to teach you how to write, and she knew how to speak, and we had to speak correct English, or you can't eat dinner. That's just the way she was brought up. Her grandfather was a great judge, and she grew up, but basically with her grandfather, because her parents lived in the country. So she would live with her grandfather, who was a judge in town. But he would give them, her and her sister, every day, a poem to read, a little book to read, an assignment. And when they come to dinner, at the table, they have an envelope. They have to open it, and there's a question about the poem or the reading. And if they can't answer that question, they go to bed without dinner. And they die 1,000 deaths. So they read their poems really carefully. They studied really carefully. And he was usually very merciful with them. He was a nice man. But he wanted them to learn these things and also learn how to speak. You have to speak correctly. Again, this was a different age. This was a different time. These were different people. I had the honor of growing up around people like that. When all of us ate together, the children, the grandchildren, the parents, the grandparents, even the great-grandparents, and we all spoke the same language. We had to. And if you didn't speak it correctly, you would be corrected. And my mother might not do it in a nice way. She would say, that's wrong. Don't ever say that again, okay? But this was a different culture. It was a different time in which you are supposed to speak an agreed upon idiom. You don't just have your jargon that you speak with the 12-year-olds like you. At the dinner table, you have to speak the language of the great-grandfather, the great-grandmother, the great-aunts, the great-uncles, and the whole family. That is the way we like it to be. That's the way Islamic civilization was. Many Hispanic people have this also, because Hispanics often care a lot about the family and all speaking together, understanding each other. But that's very important, because we need to speak the same language. And the grandfather needs to be able to understand the child. And the child needs to be able to understand the grandfather as well. So, there is a time when it's proper to correct grammar and pronunciation. It used to be in our schools. You had to learn how to enunciate, how to pronounce the words. That was one of the subjects you had. And if people got up to talk, to give a speech, other students will be asked to judge their enunciation. Did he pronounce the words right? And many of our brothers and sisters today, God bless them and God guide them, who come out of the world of texting, they cannot enunciate. And if they get up to give a speech or a khutbah, you can't hardly understand a word they say. They just go on. One word flows into another. Okay, that's not the good way to speak. That's not the proper way to speak. But again, we have to be very careful not to correct other people's speech. And that could be extremely offensive. Especially, let's say that a person doesn't speak correct English because maybe they're not well educated. So that could be extremely hurtful to them. And that's what we call contentiousness. That's being contentious. It's disrespectful. Another thing is that you talk about their meaning, like, really? You believe that? You expect me to believe that? No, listen to what they said. Try to get it correctly. And again, often we're ready to fight before they even finish their sentence. Especially if they talk about something which we may not completely agree with. Especially when we talk about things like differences of opinion that we have in the religion. We talk a lot of times here about innovations, and that's something very serious. But if the innovator talks to you, you've got to listen. You don't want to be ready to fight from the time that he opens his mouth. And you want to try to find an intelligent, wise way of responding so that maybe he or she can understand that they're wrong. If he starts to speak and immediately, I am in his face, as we say, that's contentiousness. And many of us have to hold ourselves back in that because of the fact, as soon as we hear certain things, we're ready to go. We're ready to contend. But you don't want to do that. You want to be able to control yourself. You want to be respectful to him, even though he might be completely wrong. But he may not be guilty. This is what he was taught. He may not know any better. And you want to be able then to speak to them in a wise way. Contentiousness. Often husband and wife, this is what happens, right? We become very contentious, especially when we're not happy with each other. And the husband can't say anything but that the wife has got something to say about it that bothers him. Like, why can't you just listen to me? And she doesn't have anything to say, but that he's got something to come back with. That is contentiousness. And you don't want to do that. You don't want to do that. And generally speaking, with your spouse, you want to learn not to say no. Doesn't mean you have to agree with everything they say, but, no is a hard word. You can see when children when they learn the word no, they use it like a weapon. No. No. I have a grandson who says, no way. My daughter, his mother, might ask him, eat your food. No way. Come here, go to sleep. No way. Okay, so he's aware of how powerful that makes him. La, right? It's like a sword. But generally, with our friends and with our spouses, even our children, try not to use these harsh words and try to find an alternative. If you can't agree, then bring an alternative. There's something else we could do. But a lot of us, God guide us, we are there to negate from the beginning. No, we can't do that. We don't have time for that. That's contentiousness. And you want to avoid that. Be kind. Again, the great people, the great awliya, they are so patient. They listen so carefully. And then they respond mildly, even though maybe you said things that should have them outraged. Intent. That's contentiousness too. What you said was right, but you did that because you wanted to show that you were better than everybody else. Right? You were right, but your motive was wrong. Yeah, what you said was good, but you did that to hurt us. You did that to, for this reason or that reason. So we talk about their intent. and you don't know the person's intent. And be careful about that, because that's their hidden secret. You should have a good opinion of them. Just listen to what they say. And, then try to respond to it in a balanced way. Again, the Prophet, ﷺ. Look at the Bedouin. He walks into the mosque. When is the day of judgment? He blurts it out. Mata sa'a. And the Prophet beautifully responds with a smile. وَمَا أَعْدَدْتَ لَهَا. What have you prepared for it? You see how beautiful that is? How brilliant that is? And that's the way he was too. Once he was traveling with his companions, and a Bedouin came up and grabbed his camel's halter. Stopped his camel right there. Stopped it. And the Sahaba get down and they're going to stop this Bedouin. It's like, and the Prophet says, رُبَّمَا أَرِبٍ lahu. I think that's what he said. رُبَّمَا أَرِبٍ lahu, which is beautiful Arabic. It says, maybe he has some great need. He took my camel, he stopped my camel. He probably has some erib, which is a beautiful word in Arabic, which means like some hidden need, some driving need. So let him take my camel and let's talk with him. See what he wants to say. That is the opposite of contentiousness. And this is what we want to seek. Imam al-Ghazali says, whenever someone says something to you, if it is true, then believe it. Accept it as true. Even if he's your enemy. Even if he belongs to a school of thought that you don't believe is correct and you don't agree to. But if that was true, we acknowledge that's true. Not like I'm going to reject everything you said. You're 100% wrong. Most people are never 100% wrong. The most wrong of people is maybe 20%, 50%. But whenever people say something true, accept it. And again, backbiting is a very serious thing. And may Allah protect us from that. But if someone does backbite you, then, there's no harm and you're benefiting from that. Like, why did you say that about me? Like, maybe I do need to work on this. Maybe I do need to study more. Maybe I didn't do this in the best way. So again, if it's true, you can benefit from it. They say your enemy's criticism is the best advice. If it is false or a lie, this is critical. If it is false or a lie, but has no connection to religious truth or worldly rights, then keep silent. And this is very important because many of us feel that whenever someone says something in our presence that is not completely correct, that we have to correct it right there. And that's not the prophetic way. They say something that is not completely correct and it's false, but it's not a serious matter. It doesn't pertain to fundamental religious truth, like saying falsehoods about God, and it doesn't pertain to a worldly matter that's extremely important. Like, is Kansas really flatter than a pancake? Not that important, right? So you don't have to respond, and you shouldn't respond. To respond here also leads to contentiousness, and it can be contentiousness. How much do we like people who are correcting every single mistake people make? That's regarded to be discourteous. So also you have to know that just because someone says something that is not perfectly correct, you don't have the obligation to speak. And you can be silent with no harm. And generally that silence is better. And again, we see this in the great elders, the wise elders, the great awliya. They look at you and smile. And it may be that half of what you said was superfluous, shouldn't have probably been said. Maybe it's even mistaken, and they won't say a thing. Okay? This great sheikh I was with for 19 years, I used to serve him, and we'd take him, I'd get him a hotel room in Medina or Mecca, and bring him food. That was an honor. And in Mecca and Medina, it's often quite hot. And so often I would wear, the sirwal that I wear, and I used to wear t-shirts, like with the basketball t-shirt, and it covers your nakedness. And there's nothing wrong with it, but it was very hot. And I found that other kinds of t-shirts I can't really wear. They just become solid water, and they change, they begin to smell. So I would wear that for 7 years. And then after 7 years, he told me very politely, it would actually be better if you wore what we call an araqi, which is actually what I have on under here, which is basically a Sudanese type of dress, because he's from that background. But it comes to here, and it comes to here, and you wear that instead of a t-shirt. Many of you know what kind of dress I'm talking about. So he said, that would be better for you, because it's more respectful. And I probably turned red like a beet. I have been helping you for 7 years, dressed like this for 7 years. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell me that? He said, because these are the kind of things we can wait 7 years for. You see, so that's a lesson. Don't correct people like that. Don't be correcting people right and left. Give it time. You could give that 10 years. You could give that 7 years. You could give it a day, a week. You don't have to respond immediately. So that was one of the biggest lessons of my life. Immediately I went out and bought my araqis. I never wore that t-shirt again, ever in my life, right? But it's like he waited 7 years to tell me that. And this is speech, because he's not contentious at all. The Prophet said, "Man taraka al-mira'a wa huwa muhiq, bunya lahu baytun fi a'la al-jannah." Whoever puts contentiousness aside while he or she, I always like to put in the feminine pronoun, is in the right because it is understood, is in the right, a house will be built for him or her in the highest part of the garden. So they said something about you that was wrong. They said something about you that was unpleasant, but you didn't say anything because of the fact that you didn't want to be contentious. People may say that we were educated at a school we never went to. They may say that we're working in a place we don't work at. They may see that we did this and that maybe we did something else instead. We don't have to correct that right now. Not necessary to do that. And this might be something that concerns me, but I can put it off because I don't want to be contentious. And I don't want to make that person feel bad that, well, you didn't read my biography, did you? You didn't check it out. No, that doesn't make any difference whatsoever. Okay? So whenever you leave mira, and you are in the right, and the examples I gave are probably frivolous, you could think of others that are not. God will build for you a house in the highest part of the garden. وَمَنْ تَرَكَ الْمِرَاءَ وَهُوَ مُبْطِلٌ بُنِيَ لَهُ بَيْتٌ فِي رَبَضِ الْجَنَّةِ. And whoever puts contentiousness aside while he or she is in the wrong, a house will be built for him in the outskirts of the garden. That's also a beautiful hadith. But because also when we are wrong and people bring that to light, that's when we are the most contentious, right? Because you said I was wrong. You told these people I was wrong. So I will defend myself now. No, I didn't really mean that. I meant this, and you didn't understand. You didn't listen to what I was saying. So if you were wrong, it's better for you to be silent. And if you can be silent then, and not contentious, God will build you a house in Rabad al-Jannah, in the lower part of the garden. Imam al-Ghazali says, putting contentiousness aside is so difficult. That's why you get a house in paradise. And if you were right, and yet you saw there's no need for me to get involved here. There's no need for me to clarify or set the record straight. We'll just leave it go, no problem. God builds you a house in the highest part of the garden. And as you know, if you were wrong, yet you don't want to be contentious, you don't want there to be a fight, then he will build for you a house in the lower part. Again, because it's so difficult to do both. The first person has a greater right, the second person doesn't. But if he or she can control themselves, then God will give them a great reward. So he says, when people say things that you disapprove of or that you object to, then you must have a compelling religious reason to respond. Not just because you don't like that. This is very difficult for us, and our cultures don't instill this in us. Our cultures today make us ready, we're quick on the draw, right? We're ready to shoot. That's not the way it's supposed to be. You need a compelling religious reason. The Prophet ﷺ is teaching us this in that hadith. And mira always involves in it the intent to hurt the other person, to provoke the other person, to challenge the other person, to abuse the other person, to show that you're better than the other person. So these are not good motives. And you know how difficult it is to avoid this. But wallahi, when we can learn to do this, we attain a level that is incredible. Usually, contentiousness involves contempt, despising the other. Again, husbands and wives, marriage is never easy. Marriage is always difficult, even with the best spouses. But the one thing you never want to develop in you is contempt for your spouse. That's usually the end. And a lot of people, we develop contempt, we cultivate the contempt, and we live in that mire for years. That's not right. You've got to stop that. And you've got to get back respect for her or for him. This is very important. And you've got to believe this can be done. People who have severe marital problems, they believe there is no hope. Finished. I'll never love her again. He will never love me again. I'll never love him again. They become convinced of that. That's Satan. You can get her back like the first day. She can get you back like the first day. You've got to work for that. Probably you need help with that. Probably you need counseling with that. But that's possible. Watch the tongue. And begin with the tongue. And don't speak with contempt. How much time do we have? Okay, so now let's move on to commanding right and forbidding wrong. Because in commanding right and forbidding wrong, we want to be very careful not to be contentious, not to be disputative, not to be argumentative. So this applies here also. Commanding right and forbidding wrong is good speech, generally speaking. It's something good to do. Again, we use the word commanding, but it doesn't mean do this and forbidding. Don't do that. That's not what it means. It means, to teach people what is right, to try to bring them to do what is right, and to try to forbid them from what is wrong, but in a way that is respectful and effective. And again, many of our people who talk the most today about forbidding wrong and commanding right, they take this as a license for their ego to get in your face, stand up and tell you the truth. And this is wrong, brother. You don't know what you're talking about. Okay, that's not the way we do it. That's not the way we do it. Contentiousness has no place here whatsoever. And even in traditional Muslim societies, commanding the right and forbidding the wrong was primarily the obligation of the muhtasib. The muhtasib. And this is a municipal figure who is like a judge, and he is in charge of the streets and the markets and things like that, the muhtasib. And he has his own police force. And he's trained to be a judge. He has the same qualifications of a judge. But the muhtasib, he has to correct what is wrong. He has to encourage people to do what is right. But even he is trained to do that with great dignity and with great care, and to sort of pull people to the side and never to come down on them hard the first time. It's like, please don't do this again, okay? This is not correct. And of course, it depends on what they were doing, what they were saying. Some things may be very serious and they require a serious response, and he can give you that. He can make your life miserable for you. But they don't usually do that. Usually he's the most respected of all people in the city. Why were Islamic cities so beautiful? Why was the building done so correctly? The muhtasib. He's always on the case. You can't put your door here because your door will open and show you the door of your neighbor. Put your door a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right. Don't build your house so high. You can now see into your neighbor's garden. That wouldn't be a good neighbor. So keep your house at this level. That's what the muhtasib will do. Okay, so he enjoins right and he forbids wrong, but generally he does it with great wisdom. And we have many stories about beautiful muhtasibs like that. People respected them greatly as a rule. So commanding right and forbidding wrong has rules, and we have to know about those rules. First of all, you don't shout. That's not what commanding here means. You don't get in someone's face. Did the Prophet ever do that, sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Because he is your guide. So you try to correct things the way that he would. And generally it means you don't do it in public. When you correct a person in public, you usually scandalize them. So if you see he's not doing the right thing, she's not doing the right thing, then you might find a way to get to them privately. And again, do you have to do it right this minute? You can't wait a day. You can't wait a week. See, and so you have to measure it out. And you want to do this in the most effective way possible. And as a rule, you want to do this in private. And you want to do it nicely and with kindness. Maybe get to know the person that you want to correct. Maybe have them over for tea 1 or 2 times, become friends. And then you might find an indirect way to talk about that thing. Also, commanding right and forbidding wrong are societal obligations, not private obligations. In Islam, as you know, we have fardul ayn, individual obligations. You've got to pray, fardul ayn. You've got to fast Ramadan if you're healthy and able, fardul ayn. Societal obligations are fardul kifaya. They are the obligations that are done by certain people who are trained and often delegated and have the knowledge for that. Medicine is fard kifaya. I am not allowed to practice medicine, and it's not my individual obligation. But those of you who are trained in medicine, you are fulfilling a fard kifaya, a societal obligation. Enjoining right and forbidding wrong is a societal obligation. And for that reason, it generally had designated people to do it. And this is also a good thing even in our mosques, that we have particular men and women who are wise, who are thoughtful, who are knowledgeable. And if there is something that has to be corrected, they do it. And not just uncle so-and-so or auntie so-and-so or brother so-and-so, who doesn't really know how to do this. And they're usually doing it out of contentiousness. And they're usually doing it out of contempt. And then the whole thing doesn't work. And this is true of many of our brothers who feel that we're wrong about many things. but they correct us in a way that shows that they feel they're better than we are. They look down on us. This is all wrong. And the injunction to command right and forbid wrong, it does not allow for that. You have to be qualified. And again, we've said this before. When you begin to correct people, you've got to know what you're talking about. Can't just be that, well, I've never seen anybody do this before. I never saw somebody come into our mosque with golden earrings. So you're in his face? No. You can't do that. New convert, maybe he just did tawbah. We're going to bring him in, take care of him, and little by little, he learns the rules of the game. You don't want to push him out of the door. You have to know that the matter that is being enjoined, you say you've got to do this. It's got to be a matter of consensus. Okay? Unless, for example, if we're all Hanafis here, but we're not. We've got some Malikis, we've got some Shafi'is, we've got some others. Okay? Most people probably are Hanafis. It's a wonderful school. But you can't apply any Hanafi rule that the Shafi'is and the Malikis and the Hanbalis don't also agree to. Did you ever study that? Well, no. Then just be quiet. When we talk about the golden earring, Imam al-Shafi'i has qualifications on that. Okay? So he would say that, wait a minute, you have to know about the gold earrings first of all. Are they solid gold? Because they're probably not. And there are other things to be considered. So you have to know that this obligation is a matter of consensus that all of us agree to. And you have to know also that it is an obligation, a fard, that it's not mandub, that it's not something recommended. Because things that are recommended, they cannot be commanded. Okay, like it's recommended, for example, when you sit facing the Qibla, that you not extend your legs in the direction of the Qibla. Are you going to correct the brother? Get your legs right. Sit straight. No, you can't do that. That's wrong. That's forbidden. Because this is not an obligation. He is allowed to extend his feet in the direction of the Qibla. Maybe his knees hurt. So it's recommended that he not do that. But maybe he's not able to do that. Okay, so you don't say anything about that. And there's so many other things that we could talk about. Don't command people to do things that are recommended. Because when you don't do something recommended, you are not blameworthy. You understand? In other words, he put his feet in the Qibla, that's not blameworthy. He didn't do a recommended thing, so it's not blameworthy. You can't blame him. You have no right to blame him. You've got to make sure that the thing that is forbidden is haram. That is not a matter of dispute. And that all of us agree, this Shafi'i brother, Shafi'i sister, Maliki brother, Maliki sister, Hanafi, Hanbali, and so forth. We all agree this is wrong. That takes knowledge. And who among us has that kind of knowledge? So you have to know the details of the law. And you have to know about different opinions. You have to know about what is dhanni, what is conjectural, what is qat'i. And you cannot command people to do what is permissible. Mubah. So mubah things that you're allowed to do or allowed not to do, this is not your business. You do not forbid what is disliked. Makruh, like this person put his foot in the Qibla, facing the Qibla. That is makruh. Do I have a right to blame him? No. That's the definition of makruh. That he's not worthy of blame because he did it. Yes, it would have been much better if he didn't do it. And little by little, we may teach him these adab, these courtesies. But one of the first rules of courtesy is you never demand it of anybody but yourself. If you are a person of adab, then you make yourself be courteous. And you don't say, that wasn't courteous, brother. That wasn't courteous, sister. Why did you speak to me like that? No, you don't do that. The courteous person is ready to accept the discourtesy of the discourteous person. And look at your blessed Prophet ﷺ, how discourteously he was treated by his enemies. How horribly he was treated by his enemies, and yet how dignified he was in his bearing. That's the way he was, ﷺ. And even with the believers, they do many things because they haven't learned that are not right. And the Prophet is absolute dignity. Allah says, don't look into the dishes of the food that he's serving you. They were poor people. They ate once a day. The Prophet once told the Sahaba, how will you be when the time comes when you eat twice a day? And they said, is that true, Messenger of God, that a time will come when we eat twice a day? They were poor people. They lived off of very basic food, water, and dates, and often dates that are wormy. Dates that are not good dates. It's all they have. They didn't have much food. And if they come to the Prophet, it's like, he's going to give us food. Well, usually his food will also be the same thing you're eating because he doesn't have a special allotment. He shares his food, but don't look into the place to see, what do we have for dinner? And the Prophet would never say anything. But God says, don't do that. That's not respectful of your Prophet, because your Prophet ﷺ should be shown the greatest respect of all. So you have to make sure that, you are not forbidding things that are disliked. That's very important. Or that are mubah, that are permissible. It is also not permissible to enjoin right or forbid wrong when doing so will lead to what is harmful or detrimental. Again, what are the rules of speech? Truth. And in the case of enjoining right, it's got to be consensus. And then it's not harmful. So if you come and you enjoin right or forbid wrong to somebody in a way that shows contempt and disrespect, he's going to listen to you, not in your life. He will never listen to you out of the door. Never come back. Okay, well, that's not what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to bring him closer, get him into the community, help him, so it won't cause harm. And sometimes people who do wrong are ready to retaliate. You correct him and he'll hit you in the face. You correct him and maybe he'll pull out his gun. I come from Chicago. Pray for us. We have 70 shootings on every normal weekend. 70 shootings. Okay, that's good, that's bad. But you've got people there that they're ready to pull the trigger. I remember years ago, when a man was shot on the L in Chicago, and he had blue shoes, really beautiful blue shoes. And somebody stepped on him, and he talked to that man. That person said something back, and he shot him dead. Okay, so be careful, because some people respond, and you also don't want to harm yourself. And you are responsible to see that you are not harmed unless it's absolutely necessary for you to be courageous and to take a courageous stance. You've got to make sure that what you are going to do will produce what benefit? Truth, harm, benefit. Is he going to listen? No. Then you don't have to say anything. And maybe we can find another way to go about this. But, this is so important because, again, you have to live this law as an amana, as a trust. And this is what many of our brothers and sisters don't do. They use their understanding, their misunderstanding of the rules and regulations and the commands of the law to justify their ego trips. And that you never want to do. That's wrong. So, you must have a reasonable expectation that you will benefit the person by this. Again, Imam al-Ghazali says, take them to a private place, become their friend, give them some tea, talk with them. Maybe there's other things they need to know. And then maybe you can do this. Again, that requires a lot of giving. And the generous man, the generous woman, is the one who's ready to give of himself. It's also generosity to give of your wealth. And that's very important. But it's easier for you to spend your money than it is for you to spend yourself, to give your time. You're busy. You've got 1,000 things to do. Why should you sit with this brother? Let's get this done with. This is haram. Get out of here. Right? No. Give it a week. Give it a month. Give it a year. And again, I want to remind you of the story of Sheikh Muhammad Abu Bakr. Allah have mercy on him. He corrects me after 7 years. Okay? That's a long time. And it's because this is something that, it's maybe mandub, but almost just mubah. So take your time on this. And you don't have a knee-jerk reaction. Okay? There must be no condescension. I'm better than you. You don't know anything, do you? So we'll correct you. This is the way you should do it. And then again, like you have people that correct the way you pray. Okay? Get your hands up here. Okay? Get them up here. Get those feet spread. It used to bother me a lot. And most of the imams, they don't like you to step on other people's feet. And, you'd be praying and the brother puts his feet on your feet. And the other one does too. It's like, I got 2 big feet on my feet. Of course, I am contentious. This is one of my problems. So I put my feet on theirs. That's what I will do every time. I put my feet on their stop. And then they just they won't do it again. They won't do it again. That's usually been my experience. Like, you step on my foot, I'll step on your foot. But still, we don't want to be doing things like that. We want to be nice. Don't be condescending. Don't be triumphalist. But you see, most of these things in prayer, where you put your feet, where you put your hands, whether you put your hands on the side, whether you put your hands like this, those are all matters of difference of opinion in the schools. And no school says that this school is wrong because it doesn't do it our way, because these are based on evidence, which is dhanni. One of the questions is about dhanniyat in the Quran. I hope we can come back to these questions. But that's why you have ijtihad. That's why you have madhab. But you don't object to the fact that they don't pray exactly like you. You don't object to the fact that they don't make wudu exactly the way you do. Some people wipe their necks when they make wudu. Other people don't do that. So we accept those differences, and we never make those differences a point of contention. Certainly not a point of enjoining right or forbidding wrong. In the Maliki school, if you wash your feet, you should do it with your left hand. Okay, now that is mandub. If you saw a brother, even if he were in the Maliki school, washing his hand with his feet with his right hand, you don't correct him. Because that's not something to be corrected. You might teach him that, that it's better to wash with your left hand. This is all being civilized. This is all learning to be respectful of each other. And when we do that, then things begin to work. When we're respectful of each other, when we want to serve each other, we want to help each other, then things begin to work. That's why the path to Allah is serving other people, loving other people, loving God's creation. If we're all servants, We're all khadim. There's not a problem that we can't solve. You've got this idea on service, I've got this idea on service. We can come together with a beautiful solution. When we're all makhdum, meaning people who are supposed to be served, and have you ever known people like that? I have. I know a man, I won't say much about him, but, if the food that was brought to him was not just right, he would throw it at the cook. And she might cry, and she would cook again and bring it back, and he might throw it at the cook again and reduce her to tears. One time he did it 4 times. I knew a person like that. He was a Muslim. Can you believe it? He even said he was a sheikh. I never believed that. Sorry, disqualified. Eat your breakfast. But this is the thing, that when we are people who serve and are not people who demand to be served, we can solve every problem. When we are people who demand to be served, you better speak to me right. Give me the right title. Do this and do that. Then we can't solve a single problem. This is the problem with many Muslims today. They all expect to be served. They all expect to be respected. You have to talk to them a certain way. I could tell you a story, but we're out of time, and probably that story would be left untold. But it's a story about a man who insisted. I had a letter for him to try to get somebody else in a school. And the letter was from me, and it's from the dean of my school. And I had to go to a lot of trouble to get that letter, and I had to go to a lot of trouble to take it to him. And he took the letter and threw it down on the table. And he said, "Who does this man think he is? He called me such and such." I never memorized these words. Ma'ali, sumu, this, that, and the other. He said, "I am this." And he called me that. It's like he didn't call him His Highness or His Excellency or whatever. He wouldn't even read the letter. I said, "Could you please read the letter? Because we just want to get this sister into college." I had to go back, get a new letter. I had to go to the dean, who liked me. He was outraged, as you can imagine. And I said, "Could you please just call him such and such? In private, you can call him whatever you want, but give me a new letter." So he did. He was really angry. He was livid. And then I took it back to this person, and he says, "Okay, let her in. Let her in the college." Alhamdulillah, she got in. But the thing is that, may Allah make us humble people, respectful people, بإذن الله. اللهم وفقنا لما تحبه وترضاه وجعلنا من عبيدك السعداء وأمتنا على كلمة الهدى علمنا ما ينفعنا ووفقنا للعمل بما علمتنا به واجعل ما نحن فيه خالصا مخلصا لوجهك الكريم يا رب العالمين. اللهم اجعل تجمعنا هذا تجمعا مرحوما وتفرقنا بعده تفرقا معصوما لا شقيا منا ولا محروما. آمين آمين آمين. It's wonderful to be with you, honestly and truly. I've never been at a rihla I didn't like. And what was his name? Will Rogers? He was pretty funny. Will Rogers. I like Will Rogers. But Will Rogers said, "I never met a man I didn't like. And I never met at the rihla a man or a sister that I didn't like either." And may Allah bless these wonderful gatherings. And again, may He enable us to take home treasures and, to work together. That's what we're doing right here. We're working together. This is great community. But as we go back to our various places in Finland or in Australia or in South Africa or Britain or Turkey or the United States or Canada or Mexico, wherever it may be, we've got to work together. We've got to stay together. And that's pretty easy today. It's one of the good things about the internet. It enables us to link up with the world. Our work today has to be like that. That's my belief. For it to be effective, it can't be limited to one particular place. It's got to be coordinated to the best of our ability with all these wonderful brothers and sisters who have similar dispositions and who have beautiful intentions. Ameen. Wassalamu alaikum.